I want to start this evening's program with a history lesson that is unknown to everybody thus far who has spoken on TV and radio, that is unknown apparently to the prosecutors, that is unknown to the Department of Justice, or known but rejected. We've had contentious presidential elections in the past, which this Department of Justice and this prosecutor would say are efforts to overturn an election. Now, let me be clear about a few things. The Constitution leaves it to Congress and only Congress to sort out the Electoral College votes. It doesn't leave it to a Department of Justice. There was no Department of Justice. It doesn't leave it to a U.S. attorney or special counsel. There were no U.S. attorneys or special counsels. It doesn't leave it to a grand jury or a trial jury or anybody else. Certainly doesn't leave it to inferior agencies of the federal government that didn't even exist. Congress has the final determination. In the first instance, the states have the determination. In particular, the state legislatures. I don't care what the Supreme Court says or anybody else. It's in black and white in the Constitution. To the extent Madison notes give us any guidelines, it's there too. There's nothing left for interpretation. The election of 1800, and there are others. Thomas Jefferson and his chosen vice presidential pick, Aaron Burr, tied for first place. Because back then, ballots were voted, electors voted on a president and vice president separately, even though they might be running together. So tied for first place, the challenge to John Adams, who was president at the time, 73-73, Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson. Aaron Burr stabbed Jefferson in the back. But tied for first place due to a communication error among Democratic-Republican electors, or a Burr-led conspiracy, depending on whom you believe. So right there, that would open up a federal investigation, a grand jury, witnesses, and all the rest. Of course, that didn't happen. The election went to the House of Representatives, where it's supposed to go. Alexander Hamilton, who despised Jefferson, but hated Burr even more, turned the tide by lobbying his fellow Federalists to throw their support to Jefferson after God knows how many, 36 votes. 36 votes. So the decision was made in the House of Representatives. President Jefferson. That's how he became president. Can you imagine the grand jury investigation? 1824. These are all early in the Republic. All four candidates for president came from the same party, the Democratic Republicans. Andrew Jackson, who was a hero of the War of 1812, he won the popular vote by fewer than 39,000 ballots, captured 99 Electoral College votes. Secretary of State John Quincy Adams took 84 Electoral College votes. 41 went to Treasury Secretary William Crawford, and 37 to House Speaker Henry Clay. Since no candidate earned a majority of electoral votes, the election again went to the House of Representatives. The top three are to be considered, so Clay was eliminated. But Clay still had his supporters. After a month of backroom negotiations, Clay, who came in fourth, his supporters, most of them, threw their weight behind Adams, enabling John Quincy Adams to win the House vote. Now, when Adams chose Clay as his Secretary of State soon after his inauguration, an enraged Andrew Jackson called it a corrupt bargain. That the entire election and appointment of John Quincy Adams was corrupt. And he resigned his Senate seat And he swore he would run for president again. And he did, and he won. He was not accused of obstructing an election. Or anything else, for that matter. 1860. That election wasn't just contentious, it tore the nation apart. The Democrat Party chose Abraham Lincoln's Illinois rival, Senator Stephen Douglas. The southern branch of the party defected, choosing sitting Vice President John Breckinridge as its candidate. John Bell of Tennessee rounded out the race on the ticket of the new Constitutional Union Party. Lincoln won only 40% of the popular vote, but took most of the electoral votes in the North, along with California and Oregon. Breckinridge won the electoral votes in most of the South, along with Maryland and Delaware. Bell won Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia. And Douglas won only Missouri, despite finishing second in the popular vote. Imagine all the chaos. They gave us President Abraham Lincoln. Just weeks after Lincoln's victory, with 40% of the vote, South Carolina voted to secede. They thought Lincoln was an illegitimate president on top of everything else. 6 more southern states followed, forming the Confederate States of America, February 1861. And they elected Jefferson Davis as their president. I'm putting things in perspective for you. 1876. This was a big deal. Listen carefully. Democratic governor of New York, Samuel Tilden, won by 250,000 more ballots in the popular vote than his Republican opponent, Rutherford B. Hayes, and snagged 19 more electoral college votes. So the Democrat had 250,000 more votes and 19 more electoral college votes. Still, the Democrat Tilden was 1 electoral vote short of the required majority, 185. And 20 votes remained uncounted. Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina were too close to call. Each party accused the other of fraud. And in Oregon, an elector was declared illegal and replaced with controversial results. You're 1 electoral college vote away. And one of the people in Oregon, an elector, was declared illegal and replaced. As the crisis mounted, threats of another civil war loomed. What happened? Congress established a 15-member commission of senators, congressmen, and Supreme Court justices, including 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and an independent, to decide the election. This is something that Josh Hawley had thought about in the 2020 election, for which he was viciously attacked. After the swing vote turned in Hayes' favor, that one voter who had replaced the other one decided to support Hayes, who had less votes. He was awarded all 20 electoral college votes from the disputed states, giving him the necessary 185. So this commission is set. The one controversial elector who replaced another in Oregon decides, I'm going to go for Hayes. This commission that had been set up by Congress, 15 members, said, okay, well, we'll give you all 20, Hayes. And there's Tilden, who had more electoral college votes, a much more significant popular vote. He loses. He loses. Well, the Democrats didn't take this sitting down. They threatened to filibuster and block the official voting count. And the issue was settled in negotiation in Washington's Warmly Hotel in February 1877. The Democrats would accept Hayes' victory, provided Hayes removed all federal troops from the South. And you know what that led to? the survival of the Ku Klux Klan after Ulysses S. Grant sent the United States Army down there to wipe them out. And the reversal of Reconstruction. It effectively killed Reconstruction. That was 1876. What about 2000? Al Gore and George Bush. It all came down to the outcome in Florida. Depending on how you counted, just a few hundred votes separating the candidates in Florida to determine who would be president of the United States. Al Gore starts with the lawsuits, and the lawsuits go back and forth. The recounts begin in full force. Chads, hanging Chads, and on and on and on. Went on for a month and a week. The state Supreme Court kept changing the rules to try and help Al Gore. Finally, the U.S. Supreme Court steps in, says enough is enough. Enough is enough. Bush, who won 30 states, counting Florida, maintained a razor-thin 5-vote majority in the Electoral College. Up until that time, would be the first candidate in 112 years to win the presidency without prevailing in the popular vote. (1876) election, several states sent 2 sets of electors. I guess today you'd say, oh, fake electors. For Congress to sort out. Not a grand jury. That wasn't illegal. It wasn't unconstitutional. They weren't fake. They were close races. They weren't resolved, at least to the belief of one party or the other. Both sets are sent, and Congress has to make the decision. 1960, 2 slates of electors were submitted by Hawaii because the election results first went to Nixon and then went to Kennedy. So they sent both slates, Republican and Democrat, to Congress to sort out. And do you know who the president of the joint session of Congress was back then, America? He was the vice president of the United States. You may have heard of him. Richard Nixon. And Nixon sided with the Kennedy electors. But they hate Nixon. Congressional Democrats have challenged the elections by trying to overturn the selection of electors in several states. They tried it in 2000, 2004, 2016. To no avail, because their fellow members of Congress stopped them. That's how this is decided. Vice President Pence today has gotten much more dramatic and animated, hasn't he? Donald Trump told him to reverse the course of the election. Donald Trump told him not to count electors. Donald Trump told him this. Donald Trump told him that. But Mike Pence withstood the pressure, my God. He stood there and said no. So what? He's not the first. That's his view. But I read the Constitution again today, as I do almost every day. What authority does the vice president actually have when it comes to disputes? The Constitution doesn't tell us. So I went to Madison's notes. Mr. Constitution, what do they say? Madison's notes don't tell us. And you had John Eastman and other lawyers who said that the vice president has the power to send electors back to the state or to wait on the process or to find out what's going on or to appoint a commission the way they had a commission in 1876. He's a kook, and all the other experts are right. To this day, we have no idea.